Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad, here with Doug.
Bye.
These past week or two, we've gotten the chance to play What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yes.
So this game is really hard to review. So
Yeah.
we're just going to skip past the part where we review it and tell you that it's amazing and that you should probably play it. And instead what we're going to do with this game is we're just going to do a spoiler cast. So essentially from here on out, we are going to talk about this game with no regard to spoilers. So if you have not played this game, it will ruin it for you. This game depends so much on you having no clue what's coming and just kind of every single time you get to a new story being really, just interested and curious about what's going on. So strong warning, turn us off now.
Yeah, if you even have like a passing interest in Edith Finch, you should just buy that game. Like, if you think you might like it, you're gonna love it, like, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. If you've played Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, Dear Esther, whatever walking simulator you can think of, this is one of the best of them. So we're gonna leave it there. We're gonna get into this, but fair warning, we might not jump in. I don't think we'll jump into spoilers right away, but they're coming. So there you go. But anyway, I guess to start out with, just where do you kind of stand on this game? I know we both kind of said it's the best one out there. Do you, like, how much of that do you really believe? And I guess what about it stands out to you?
I think with a lot of these like walking simulator things, I think the sort of argument for them is like these stories can only be told in video game format. And I guess there's some arguments that some of these stories, like, they definitely are presented better in a video game format. But some, like, I think Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is a really interesting radio play, is how I described it. Because I think it still could, on its own, be a radio play. Edith Finch, I think, is probably the first game where, like, this story cannot be told any other way than through gameplay and through a video game. Just because the story of not only how it's told, but, like, how it's presented plays on a lot of you being the person who's controlling the actions that are going on. I think that, like, that is usually like you with the player, what you're doing is the catalyst for these, like, short stories and these people's deaths. So I think that putting that sort of responsibility on the person, which is, I find this game like a little stressful, honestly, is because, like, you are the active person killing these perfectly nice people throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, it's very weird because it honestly, it could be told in a different medium, but I don't think it would have the same impact that it does here, just because when you go through these stories, you are the one that's putting the people through these things. When you ultimately approaching every single one of these stories, you're going to kill them. You're either going to mess something up or the game's going to lead you some way where you're going to kill this person, which there are so many of them that just the way that the game makes you play that and makes you do different things control-wise, that even though you're only using just your normal DualShock controller, really make you feel like, oh my gosh, like, this is coming. The one that stands out to me most, just giving you that gameplay feeling where you're like, oh my god, is Calvin's, who's the kid on the swing. Good. Because you're just sitting there and the only control you have is just pumping the sticks like you're pumping your legs on a swing, and just as you're doing it, like, the whole time, like, oh my god, is he gonna fall off and break his neck? Like, is the tree gonna snap? And you're just sitting here going higher and higher, knowing that ultimately doing this over and over again, you're just slowly waiting for him to die. And it's far enough into the game that you've kind of got to the point where you're like, oh my god, I'm just gonna keep killing these people every time I meet one.
That one I think that one specifically has great lead up, because there's a point when you're doing, because, like, I think there's a fun aspect for that one of you exploring the controls and understanding how they work, because, like, one stick kicks, like, one leg and the other kicks the other, and you're like, oh, this is kind of, and then, like, you sort of get in the swing and you have that sudden, when I was, like, playing, I had this, like, sudden feeling of, like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like, it's like a swing simulator. Oh, that's kind of neat. And then, like, as you're playing, like, oh, I got this, and then suddenly, like, I'm going a little too high. Okay, I'm going a little too. And then it's just like, oh no, and there's, like, the kind of this, like, sense of dread that these stories kind of go. It's like they start you with this sort of, I think, this playful sort of sense of wonder, and then as they progress, they slowly move towards this, like, inevitability. And like they said, they did that through the gameplay mechanics. That was a really that one I like a lot because of how they plays with those gameplay mechanics.
Yeah, and I think all of that leads to the emotional feeling that you get from this game. And I think all of that, like you said, really does take this whole quote-unquote walking simulator genre to its peak of where it's been to this point, because when you do have these other ones, like you said, with Everybody That's Gone to the Rapture, it is pretty much just walking to the next little floating color bubble. Or, even in one like Soma, that's one of my favorites, it's really just you walking from thing to thing to thing, and the game's kind of doing some stuff along the way in the world, but really all you're doing is just walking. Whereas this one, it's like, no, you're gonna walk, you're gonna get this story, and then we're gonna kind of try and mess with you a bit. And I think that's the weird thing about this, is it does feel like the game's almost messing with you. Like, oh yeah, like here's your, look at this, you're an owl, and now, oh god, now you're dead. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's just this like weird sense of like, this is really cool, this is really fun, oh god, I'm gonna die. And it gives you that weird sense of dread. That's just, it's so cool the way they were able to work that story and that gameplay together. And I think that's something that video games as a medium needs to be striving for. And I think that's something that almost gets looked to the side sometimes, of like, gameplay is just there to be fun, when this game in particular really looks at gameplay and says, okay, we're going to make gameplay an element of the story. Yeah. And almost every one of these stories controls a little bit different based on the unique things that you're doing, which is just such a cool concept that I don't feel like is explored nearly as much as it should be.
No, yeah, and I think the thing that's kind of like, I think I've seen that like a little bit before. Like, you have like different mechanics in game, but not one where there's like wholly different mechanics every time. I think the thing that they do play on is the fact that the game, as far as like these walking simulator goes, is actually kind of fun. They make it fun at some points, which is a very, very weird feeling, especially because the characters are going to die. I think a really good example of this one is the the baby. What's the character's name?
Gregory, the little baby. Yeah,
Gregory. The bathtub scene. That scene is probably the most is one of the most far fantasy ones they have, and it's a gorgeous scene of like a little kid playing with toys in the bathtub to this like music. It's like this sort of play of sorts of I don't know what you call it. What do you call those, like synchronized swimming? It's like it's a synchronized
it's a routine.
Swimming. Yeah, it's a routine with toys, and it's actually kind of a fun scene because the physics of the water are really neat. And then I think just from the onset of that, though, you understand like the baby, like, because babies drown in bathtubs sometimes, and you just know that is likely the inevitability of this. So it is this really weird dichotomy of you actually having fun with the mechanics, but knowing story-wise that this is going to hurt. And so it's this really weird feeling I've never had, because you don't usually have fun when you have these sort of stories. Yeah. Like when you're reading a book or something, you're not enjoying these stories for like, yay, this is kind of neat. But it's like there is that. So I think that like weird play on emotions I liked, but it just felt like something I just never really experienced before, just in my like lifetime.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, I like that the game like played on that constantly with having scenes that are very fun or have very neat mechanics and very neat settings, while that this is all inevitably going to end in a character's death.
Yeah, and I think Molly's story really sets the tone for that.
Yeah.
Just because this is your first introduction to the game. Up to that point, you're just kind of walking around this house. You're seeing the creepy rooms, and you get in there and you get to the point where you're like, oh yeah, I was locked in my room and I was hungry, so I ate hamster food. And you're like, wait, what? Oh, okay. And then she eats the toothpaste, and you're like, what? And then it's like, oh, now I'm a cat. And you're like, okay, what the hell just happened here? Like, where is this game going? And I think it does a good job of introducing you to these fantasy elements, but at the same time, like, kind of teaching you, like, just so you know, like, there's going to be some crap that's going to happen. And I think it does mess with that, because when you're in the owl flying around, it's kind of fun. It's something different. You don't normally get to have that mechanic where you're flying over things and jumping down, and just that whole thing's this kind of fun thing. But it's really kind of like, oh yeah, like enjoy this. Okay, now we're gonna get dark. You're a monster. You're gonna eat, and you know what I mean, and all this other stuff that gets
even that owl one where you like kill like the mother rabbit and eat it, and then you choke to death on it. And you're like, what the hell is?
Oh yeah.
So
I think that's just like this cool way to introduce this game, and I think then it does build well, because I don't remember the particular order, but I feel like the comic book one with Barbara was after that.
Yeah, it was definitely soon after, at the very least.
Which you get this one where you're just these fun fantasy animals, and you're flying around, and you're a shark flopping down a hill. Yeah, and then which is this really funny scene that like almost feels like something out of some like slapstick comedy movie. Just, oh yeah, here comes the shark rolling down the hill. And then you get to this really cool, and it was one of my favorites, was Barbara's, was just this comic book aesthetic, walking through the house, like just everything about it is just this really cool aesthetic. And again, it gives you that feeling of like, this is really cool, and like I'm seeing some neat things. And then as the game progresses, it gets so much darker from there.
Yeah.
And with the first one being Molly, I don't really feel like they really gave a clear definition of what happened to her.
Yeah, I couldn't really tell if she choked or died because of the holly berries or something. But I think that one's. I think there's a few like very ambiguous death. I think Molly is definitely like in the center of basically everything. Like her death isn't super clear. It's kind of half fantasy, half realism. It's weirdly in the middle compared and then they kind of like go way far fantasy or way far realistic.
Yeah, and then you get to Barbara, which again has that fantasy element.
Yep.
And again, the game just kind of slowly builds up to the point where you get to ones like Gregory, like we talked about, which is the baby in the bathtub, which is just this super dark idea. And this really, as soon as you get there, you're just like, oh God, like, I know what's going to happen and I don't want it to happen.
But you have these really cutesy animals and toys that in any other setting would have been a very cute, fun scene that it made not cute and not fun. Well, it made it fun. You made it cute and fun, but it also played with it. I also really appreciate that they definitely like they have those super fantasy ones, but they also have these strikingly realistic ones of the father of Sam's death, which is basically Sam is your grandfather, and he just dies in a hunting accident, and they just play it straight like he died in a hunting accident, and you just go through the hunting and you go through the fun days that you had together. I think they do it through taking photos. But it's like it's kind of strange because I think that's the only story where I feel like this might be the one that's true. Like of all the stories that they kind of have this weird sort of, is it true? Is it not? Like this is the one that just seems the most true. And that one is like, it was surprising to me because there was no fantasy to it. There was no fun to it. There was just this, death.
I think there was some fun to it. It just wasn't the Gregory style fun where you're just playing with the frog in the water. It was fun in the sense of like, it very accurately depicts, I think, a family relationship. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's fun to see kind of these characters interact in a way that's very, very real. Like I don't think either one of us are hunters or anything, but you know what I mean? It goes back to that feeling of like, oh yeah, like going and hanging out and doing this with my dad. You know what I mean? It brings back that feeling. You're like, oh, this is cool. Like me and my dad are just walking through the woods, and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I think that moving into that, I think that's the one that really shifts the tone. 'Cause I think that one did that one come before the bathtub one?
Yeah. I think the Sam one is like, because it starts like the earliest family members. And I think when Sam's death, I think Sam is probably the first character that you might have already known about before. Because like you actually do have you actually had like a relationship, or your mother had a relationship with them. I think like a lot of the characters like, wait, who is this guy? Okay, I kind of understand this guy. But Sam, I think, is the first character you actually have an idea of who he was, like almost immediately. Like this was your grandfather, your mother's father. And I think because after that point, that's when you start getting into her family members and her aunts, like her closer family, like her direct aunt, uncle, and then her brothers. And I think, I agree. I think that is like kind of the turning point for it, because that's when you moved in the new area of the house is after his.
Yeah, I think kind of continuing down that serious path, one that really stuck out to me was Lewis, who's the dude who chops the fish heads.
This is one of like legitimately most incredible scenes I've ever seen in a video game. And like, I think as far as I'm concerned, this is the climax of the game. Like more so than the ending. This had,
why? Why? Because I agree with you, and I want to know why.
I think this scene, even completely divorced from the game, of how they use mechanics to tell a story, like how they use the controller, how they use mechanics for storytelling. Just if you took this scene like completely out of the game on its own, would be incredible. And like I honestly think this would be like an award-winning scene. Like if this was a short film, if there was a short film version of video games, like this would be a nominee or like one of the best ones ever. I think the I guess, I mean, because people have played this, I would hope if they're listening to this, I think that the scene of you just like kind of cutting fish is kind of you get that motion almost immediately. It's a very repetitive motion that you continue out throughout the entire thing. So like, as I haven't really seen sort of this multitasking of two completely different tasks in a game before. One where you're like cutting fish's heads off, doing a very mundane task, and on the other stick you are playing a fantasy adventure game. Like,
Yeah. Oh,
it's
for
this
sure.
weird dichotomy. Like, you just never seen this mundaneness and this. And I like that as the story is being told from the perspective, I think, of the psychiatrist. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yes, because the letter was written from the psychologist, like about like what he was going through before he died.
Yeah, and I like that as that story is being told, the fantasy element is escalating, and then the mundane one is like kind of going to the background. And you know, in the entire time you're doing this sort of mundane task, you're even aware that while this is a simple task, it's still a dangerous task. So there is this immediate stress of like, what if his hand gets caught in there? Like every time I slid it over, I was like, just a little bit careful because I
Yeah.
didn't want to fall into the fantasy and just try to concentrate on the fantasy because I still had this job, quote
Well,
unquote, to do.
and again, being this far into the game, you know that's coming, so it's like almost like in my mind, I'm like, I know I have to be careful with this, but it's like I don't even care. Like, what's going on over here? But it's like at the same time, like I do it once or twice, and I'm like, oh crap, am I still chopping fit? Okay, good. I am still doing that motion, right? Does he still have? Okay, yep, 5 fingers. All right, we're good. Okay, go back to this fantasy thing. What the hell is happening?
Yeah, and it plays like that. Like you have the same mental state of that character who is getting lost in this fantasy, but still has this dangerous job. So like
Yeah.
it puts you in that mindset of that character, and I like that's like one of the things we talk about with VR and stuff, of putting in the mindset of the character. This is one of those things because you have this dangerous job you're doing, but you also want to explore this fantasy land that he eventually falls into. Yeah, I can talk forever about this if you have anything to talk about in regards to that scene.
No, I think that's the thing is I think you instantly are in that fish chopping factory, and I didn't do it very long, but like I spent a summer or so working in a factory, and you do get that feeling like of just like, oh my god, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and it put me right back in that feeling of going like, okay, this is real. Like I could totally see this happening. Like again, I did this for like 6 months, and it was like completely nothing hazardous at all, but you know what I mean. It's just like as I'm doing it, I'm like, oh my god, like there are for sure have got to be thousands of people who are going through this all the time, like the same thing, like, and it's the one that in my mind sticks out as being the one death where I'm like, this is one that's like real. Like this is where I feel like they're trying to make that like, no, like some of these things have been fantasy, some of these are swinging to the moon, but there's some real shit in here that people are actually going through. And that's what really struck me with this one, is just that overwhelming feeling of like, you almost feel like you're in this kind of depressed mind state that the character's in at this point, like where you're almost succumbing to like just the dread of your daily life. And it's a really interesting feeling that, again, like you said, I've never gotten from a game before. I've never had this feeling before, and just this, it gives you, and as you're doing this motion over and over again, it gives you the mindset of like, I don't want to do this. This made up thing that I'm just making in my mind is so much better than what I'm doing every day. Like, it just puts you in this weird mental state, and like, I really feel like I could sit there and just like have somebody like explain to me like what people who are dealing with these kind of things go through. And I feel like that scene is just one of those things where it's like, this is kind of gives you a small taste of what that feeling is, and it's so powerful the way that it does that.
I think this one actually kind of freaked me out just a little bit, because it did seem like something that anybody could fall into. It just like, because it's not just the mundane, like we said, like I actually also worked in a small factory for a bit. I had to work with the injection molds, but I just think that sort of thing, like just if you fall into the mundaneness of life and then you find this, I mean, to be fair, like I think the thing is kind of interesting that it's kind of like a video game, and he's falling into the fantasy of video game, escaping his mundane life, which could also be like, you know, some sort of like fourth wall breaking criticism on like your life or who our lives or whatever, of like of the dangers of falling into this fantasy world. And I think the thing that I really like about it is how they make that fantasy world not only exciting to him but to you, because it is such, it's not just a normal fantasy world. And one of the things I liked is that the music, one of the weird details I liked is that they said that he would like hum the music like that he made up in his head. And I was listening to the song, and the song is bad that it plays during. It's just not a good song, but it just sounds like a song that somebody would just like make up, like la da 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 da, just something that somebody would make up. And so like as you find this, it's that sort of allure of just like even video games or media or just escapism in general. So it's almost like, it's kind of like this horror story, and it's this horror story sort of set in this temptation of falling into this mindset of consuming yourself in media and whatever else to sort of distract yourself and not try to improve your daily life. It is, I just that whole sequence, it shockingly stands out. Like I think it's almost to a fault. It stands out from the rest of the game so much because it's so well done, and the production values on it are like insane compared to the rest of the game. That I think it largely overshadows the ending.
I think that's a good point to move to it, where it does overshadow it a bit, because I think in my mind, like, everything after that, because I played this in one sitting. I went straight through the whole thing in one sitting.
That's crazy.
And well, it was I had to keep seeing them. Like, it was one of those things where each one hit me, and then I was like, oh my god, like, where are they gonna, like, how can you go a step further than this? Because you know what I mean. You know, like, once you get the pattern, you can tell that these things are building up more and more. So that was one of those things where I went back and played several over again, just out of pure curiosity and pure, like, enjoyment of this game. I went back and played a bunch of them over again. And my first time through, that's the point where the game almost stops. Like, I honestly can't tell you much after that because I'm so fixated on that moment.
Lewis's story, you're saying?
Yeah, Lewis's story. Yeah. Like, after Lewis's story, like, it doesn't matter because, like, that one hit me so hard that I was like, all the rest of this, like, okay, what? Oh, yeah, okay, great. Like, this is happening. Okay, whatever. But that one just hits so hard there. So, I guess ending-wise, like, what were your thoughts kind of on the ending? Because I think it is a bit of a letdown if I had to find a fault in this game, because I'm very worried that this game's going to get heavily overlooked for, like, Game of the Year and stuff like that, just because it is a smaller release and everything. Yeah. But, like, it will for sure be on mine unless some crazy things happen the rest of the year. But that's the one fault I can find with this, is the ending just, it doesn't have the punch that I would have wanted it to have.
Yeah, I think, actually, the thing I think is kind of interesting, I think, like, these stories, that they're so like nicely compact, that gives you, like, here's 2 minutes to care about the character, here's 2 minutes of the gameplay element, and then here it is, like, leading up to their death, sort of thing. So it's like these, like, kind of like chunks. While Edith, like, you don't, because she's sort of, like, exploring, and they talk a lot about Edith, but as a character, you don't, for whatever reason, I felt like she was more of, like, she felt more like an avatar than, like, this character you're supposed to, like, really care about. Like, the fact that she was pregnant was, like, I mean, it was kind of interesting. To me, I was like, oh, that's interesting to have a pregnant character, but, like, beyond that, it wasn't that interesting. And, like, and Edith's death was, it wasn't, not that it wasn't, like, interesting, but it just, like, I didn't have a sense of Edith as a character. So when things started actually eventually happening to Edith, it's not that I didn't care, but it's just, like, it just didn't mean as much, because I felt like the other characters is very clear of, like, how their stories worked. But even, like, her mother and her grandmother, I felt were, like, more, like, kind of, like, realized characters than her. But I think that was also because they want Edith to be an avatar character. Because, you know, you want the person, you know, the person playing not to, like, you know, immediately be put off by being, like, a 17-year-old girl who's pregnant or whatever.
Yeah, that's not something you put on the front of a box art that's gonna sell, like, sadly. But
yeah. So I think just because of the impact of the Lewis story, and then I think the ambiguity of the ending also makes it a little jarring, because all of the other characters, like, it's pretty clear that their life has ended. And then for the other characters, they don't have that, like, swift cutoff of their life ended. Yeah. Like, her grandma sort of disappears. Her mother, like, slowly dies of cancer.
Yeah.
That was kind of interesting, though. Like, you hold out your hand. I thought that was pretty good. And then you play as, like, Edith's son, and then Edith dies in childbirth. And I don't know. I just...
Well,
it's felt like something I didn't get rather than I did. Sorry.
No, that's a good point, because I think it is one of those things that... I don't know if I didn't get it is the right way to phrase it. I think it's one of those things where it's that one design decision of, you almost feel like there's two sides pulling at this. Like, do we make this very well defined, like, 17-year-old pregnant girl who, like, is trying to explore her family history, and as you go about exploring her family, you're learning about her, which they do a couple times, because they kind of hint. I went back and played it a couple times, and they kind of hint vaguely at the fact that you're pregnant, and they kind of hint vaguely at a couple other pieces as you go through. But at the same time, I do feel like it is heavily that avatar character, where it's that it doesn't matter who you are. Your goal is to explore these stories. So I think it's almost that tension between those two, where they didn't quite find a happy medium with Edith herself.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to kind of that ambiguity, because as an avatar character, you normally don't have that super well-defined character. You don't have that super well-defined ending, that super well-defined story arc, so to speak, because you're kind of exploring the world around you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they really want Edith to be a part of this family. So I think it's that weird tension there that really, I think, puts the ambiguity of the ending into the forefront.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't disagree with that, because I do agree. Like, the main hook is exploring these different families, and I think the combination of having 3 deaths that are all sort of a little bit odd, and you're not really sure, and then kind of at the end also saying that like this may or may not be a curse, and you're not really sure. It's just like, it's weirdly ambiguous for how direct the rest of the game is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was, that again, that could have been, this is something like I feel like actually has an answer. Like, I'm sure if you asked the guy who directed this game, like, why did you do this, like, they would have a definitive answer for it. I just didn't feel like I knew what it was.
For sure.
But besides that, I think just everything about this game is just absolutely excellent. I think they do hint at some deaths that you don't see, and I was like, dang, that would have been kind of neat to see, like the super cool dragon slide in the backyard.
Yeah, it's just laying in the pond or whatever.
Yeah, and they're like, my grandpa died when this fell, and I was like, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where there's definitely a lot of room that they could have gone with this, but yeah. I do think it's better for the fact of it's 2-hour game, and I think that's fine, and I think the fact that it knows what it is better than going like, oh, here's 10 more stories, because eventually you're going to run out. And I think this does have such a good build from Molly to the end of, you're going from that super fantasy into the more grounded and realistic, and you're going from this like kind of more, it's hard to say lighthearted death when you're talking about you know what I mean, but you're going from more of the lighthearted tone to this dark and just depressing state some of these characters are in. So I think sticking with where it was is a good design choice, just because you do get that build and you do feel the growth of what's going on in this family as it goes along. Yeah. But ultimately, I love this game.
it's good. It's real good.
It's so good.
It's real good. Yeah.
I think the only thing we didn't really get into as we kind of wrap this up here is the curse and where the curse comes from. And I honestly, like, me and you, after we both finished this, I think we texted back and forth for probably an hour trying to go like, oh, well, is it this? Is it this? What does this mean? And I almost feel like as we were doing that, like, you're losing the point. Like, I don't feel like the point is to figure this out. And I think that's almost why I don't necessarily want to get into it here, just because I think if you really start digging into that, you're kind of picking apart the pieces of the game that are just like, you know what, like, you've got to suspend that disbelief for a second. Just go, the family's cursed. And I want, you know what I mean? To me personally, I want to leave it there. I don't need the director and the developers to come out and say, well, the curse is this, and this is what it means, and if you're a blood relative, then this, and if you're married, you know what I mean? Like, you can get into all those specific. I don't want that. I want this game to stand on its own as it is, and I don't really need that closure for the curse or whatever it is that's happening to this family.
Yeah, and I think they definitely leave it. I think they give enough evidence for it being a curse and for it not being a curse, that whichever one you want to choose, like, it just kind of changes your experience of the game. Like, because a lot of this game is like, it's not only like you interacting with the game gameplay wise, but also how you interpret the story. That's part of the game, is that your own personal interpretation of these events that you're seeing. So yeah, it does not matter. I don't think the family. I think the family. It doesn't. I think it's It doesn't matter. It really has nothing to do with the game. For sure. It's weirdly important. The story seems to like make it. I think that they are kind of winking an eye that doesn't really matter if it is or not.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, hopefully if you've listened this long, you've played this game. I'm gonna feel really bad, because I really do. This is one of those games I think everybody should experience. So yeah. Anyway, I think you can tell how much we like it, considering this is, I think, the longest video we've done in a really long time. But yeah. Anyway, you can follow us or subscribe to us on wherever you're listening. Follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming. And we will see you next time.
Bye.